The Young and the Restless spoilers shock. The night had begun like any other in Genoa City, polished and glittering, wrapped in the illusion of control. Inside the Newman estate, the air was heavy with expectation, with the sense that something irreversible was about to happen. For days, the whispers had spread, rumors about Noah and Sienna, about a love that had crossed too many boundaries, that had awakened too much jealousy in a man who had once been her protector. Matt had been pacing that night, his mind consumed by visions of betrayal, humiliation, and the terrifying need to make someone pay. His world had narrowed to one purpose: to destroy the man who had taken from him what he believed was rightfully his. And when Noah pressed his lips against Sienna's in front of everyone, under the full light of the chandeliers, the fragile thread holding Matt's sanity snapped. The kiss wasn't just an act of affection; to Matt, it was the ultimate declaration of war. He stood frozen for a moment, his body rigid, his eyes burning with disbelief, while inside him, something dark and ancient awoke, the cold fury of a man who had loved too deeply, too obsessively, and now had nothing left but vengeance. The crowd murmured, unaware that a silent storm had just been unleashed among them, that the smiling man quietly stepping away from the scene was already planning something far more dangerous than anger. Matt didn't scream or strike that night. Instead, he disappeared into the quiet corners of his mind, replaying every look, every laugh, every moment he had ever shared with Sienna. He remembered the nights he had protected her, the days when she leaned on him for safety, the promises she had whispered in half-truths. To him, Noah wasn't just a rival, he was the embodiment of everything that had gone wrong in his life: privilege, charm, and the ease with which he won affection without sacrifice. And so the hatred fermented. By the time the moon rose, Matt's grief had transformed into a plan. He didn't want to just hurt Noah, he wanted to dismantle him, to make him disappear, to let the world know that no one could take what was his and walk away untouched. When Sienna later found Matt waiting for her outside her apartment, the look in his eyes made her heart stop. Gone was the man she once trusted, in his place stood a stranger, calm, almost gentle, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had already decided what must be done. His words chilled her to the core. He spoke of a final act, of justice, of how some people only learn through fear. Sienna broke down, terrified of what that could mean. She begged him to let it go, but Matt only smiled, a slow, detached smile that made her realize he was no longer listening. He had already crossed the threshold where reason no longer mattered. To him, this wasn't a crime. It was destiny, a reckoning that had been written the moment Noah took from him the only thing that had ever given his life meaning. No one noticed when Matt began his preparations. He studied Noah's routines, his security team, his hours of solitude. He discovered where the blind spots were, how long it would take to move him without being seen. Matt had once worked in security himself; his knowledge of surveillance, camera rotations, and tactical entry became his greatest weapon. He didn't need allies. He needed precision. And he had it. Days before the abduction, he had obtained a vial of a strong sedative, a blend so potent it could render a man unconscious in seconds but leave no lasting trace for hours. It was the kind of drug used in military extractions, not domestic disputes. To Matt, it was perfect. The night of the abduction unfolded with eerie calm. Noah had returned to his suite at the Grand Phoenix, unaware that his world was about to collapse. The night air was still, thick with the scent of rain. His bodyguards waited outside his door, chatting idly, unaware that the enemy was already among them. Matt moved like a shadow, precise, silent, and merciless. One by one, the guards fell, not killed but neutralized with stunning efficiency. Matt's movements were surgical. He struck nerves, applied pressure, and before they could even call out, they were on the floor, unconscious. Inside the room, Noah was reviewing some papers, perhaps thinking about Sienna, about how to mend the chaos that their public kiss had caused. He never saw the syringe until it was too late. A sharp sting at his neck, a blur of movement, a flash of recognition, and then, darkness. Matt stood over him, breathing hard, not from exertion but from the flood of adrenaline that came with power. He watched Noah's body go limp, his head lolling to the side, and for a fleeting second, he felt something almost like peace. This was the moment he had imagined for weeks, when his enemy would finally be at his mercy. He whispered something only he could hear, a promise to himself that this was only the beginning. Wrapping Noah in a dark sheet, Matt lifted him easily, the strength of obsession fueling his every motion, and carried him to the service elevator. The cameras had been looped, he had planned for everything. Within minutes, the car was gliding silently through Genoa City's back roads, the streetlights flickering across Matt's cold expression as he drove toward the unknown. Sienna's world began to unravel just hours later. She had felt something was wrong long before anyone else did. The silence on Noah's phone, the unanswered messages, all of it gnawed at her until panic overtook her reason. When she, Nick, and Sharon finally reached Noah's room, they found it eerily pristine, too still, the kind of quiet that comes only after something terrible has happened. The overturned chair, the faint smell of chemicals, the disarray of papers on the desk, these were not the signs of a man who had left willingly. Nick's instincts kicked in, he went straight to the security console, replaying footage from the last few hours. At first, it seemed normal, guards at their posts, Noah entering, the clock ticking past midnight. But then, the image flickered, distorted for a second before revealing what none of them could comprehend. Matt, moving swiftly, efficiently, his face caught just long enough for recognition to strike like a knife. Sharon gasped, but no sound came out. Sienna's knees gave way, and she clutched the table to keep from collapsing. The man she had once trusted, the man she had tried to reason with, had taken Noah. The horror spread quickly through the family. Calls were made to the police, to private investigators, to anyone who could help trace the car or track the signal from Noah's phone. But Matt had thought of that too, every device had been destroyed, every clue erased. Hours turned into an eternity as they waited for news, each minute another stab of helplessness. Sienna couldn't stop blaming herself. She replayed every conversation with Matt, searching for signs she might have missed, the tone of his voice, the flicker in his eyes, the quiet menace that had grown more visible each time they met. She realized too late that she had underestimated his devotion, mistaking obsession for affection, control for care. Now that confusion had become her punishment. Meanwhile, somewhere on the outskirts of Genoa City, Matt had driven Noah into a forgotten industrial district, a place abandoned long ago after an explosion had poisoned the ground. The building was half collapsed, the perfect place for secrets to disappear. Inside, he laid Noah on a cot, his breathing shallow but steady, and sat in the darkness, watching him. There was no triumph now, only the suffocating stillness that follows an act too extreme to undo. Matt wasn't insane, at least, not in his own eyes. He saw himself as a man righting a cosmic wrong, teaching the world that betrayal had consequences. And yet, in the depths of his chest, something small and human still ached, the echo of a love that had once been pure. Hours passed. Noah began to stir, groaning as the drug wore off. Matt didn't move, just watched, waiting for him to realize where he was. But this wasn't about interrogation or ransom. Matt didn't want money or confessions, he wanted understanding. He wanted Noah to know how it felt to lose everything, to wake up and find the world turned against him. It was cruel, yes, but to Matt it was justice. And yet, even as he sat there, the reality of what he had done began to sink in. There was no going back. The law would come, and Sienna would never look at him again. His love, his anger, his revenge, all of it had become a curse that devoured him from within. Back in the city, Nick swore he would find Matt before it was too late. Sharon tried to hold Sienna together, but nothing could erase the image of Noah being dragged away. The entire town buzzed with speculation, the media circling like vultures. For years, Genoa City had seen its share of scandals, but nothing this personal, this violent. The story wasn't just about a kidnapping anymore, it was about a man consumed by love turned to poison, a family shattered by secrets, and a woman caught between two men who had both loved her too much in their own broken ways. And so the night stretched on, a night of guilt, of desperate searches, of whispered prayers in the dark. Somewhere, far from the noise and lights, Matt watched the dawn bleed across the sky and wondered if this was the price of love, the madness that comes when the heart refuses to let go. In the silence that followed, only the sound of the wind filled the air, carrying with it the unspoken truth that in Genoa City, love was never pure, and revenge was never clean. What began as jealousy had become an obsession, and now it was too late for any of them to escape the ruin it left behind. Matt's decision to abduct Noah is a volatile fusion of hatred, humiliation, control, and the warped conviction that Sienna must be made to pay for what he reads as betrayal. Nick understands this instinctively. Not only because he has watched the naughty triangle between Sienna and Matt tighten to a choke point, but because he recognizes the residue of a feeling Matt once called love. That love has curdled into obsession, and obsession has narrowed Matt's world to a single, merciless objective. Knowing the motive, however, doesn't make Nick's choices easier. It forces him into an ethical cul-de-sac where every direction is lined with risk. Call the police and gamble with Noah's life, or submit to the demands of a man who has already crossed the border between righteous anger and criminal resolve. Matt does not want an apology or a performance of remorse. He wants Sienna confronted with consequences in a way that cannot be softened by distance or time. That is why the phone rings and his warning slices through the room with clinical precision. If the police get involved, Noah dies. If they want Noah alive, they will obey him. His demand is as simple as it is monstrous. Nick must bring Sienna to the location Matt dictates, and they will exchange one life for another. The order is a trap disguised as a bargain, a moral vice tightening around the family. In one motion Matt tests the spine of the Newmans, probes the limits of Nick's courage, and, above all, forces Sienna into a posture where she cannot look away from the wreckage her choices have helped create. Whether Matt intends to murder both Noah and Sienna is a question with no clean answer, because Matt himself is fractured. Two impulses run alongside each other and sometimes collide. The first is pure reprisal. Noah must be made to lose as Matt has lost, to taste the terror of being powerless and unseen. The second is retribution through witness. Sienna must be compelled to watch, to stand within reach of the harm and understand that her pivot toward Noah has set an avalanche in motion. Yet between these impulses yawns the most dangerous gap of all. Matt's judgment is unsteady, thinned by injury and distorted by shame. He tells himself that he wants to teach a lesson, but his behavior is the expression of a psyche tottering on the lip of a final act. What he labels justice is, in practice, a ritual of control that could swing toward annihilation the instant anything defies his script. Nick is caught between two storms, the duty to protect and the dread of turning Sienna into a sacrificial object. He calls the police. He would be reckless not to, but he does so with the grim awareness that Matt has already proven both capability and caution. This is the man who dismantled Noah's security detail with methodical precision. Any frontal intervention could become the spark that ends Noah's life. Nick's calculus hardens into a two-track plan. Comply long enough to keep Noah breathing, while quietly coordinating a rescue operation that moves like shadow, not siren. It is a strategy that offends any simple notion of heroism but honors the grim arithmetic of hostage survival. Sienna lives the longest minutes of any of them. Terror and guilt tangle until she cannot separate one from the other. She knows showing up at the exchange might save Noah. She also knows Matt's fixation could pivot and trap her in a new cage, one built not of locks but of a man's conviction that she belongs to him. If she goes, she throws her safety and dignity into the hands of someone who has already weaponized his love. If she refuses, Noah may die, and her refusal will echo in her mind as a second betrayal. The impulse to rush into the dark and atone collides with the knowledge that capitulation may only deepen the harm. Her indecision is not weakness, it is the sober recognition that every available choice bleeds. Meanwhile, law enforcement and private investigators stitched together a map from scraps that survived Matt's sterilization of the scene. A gas station camera that caught a partial plate, a sliver of footage where a looped hallway feed jumps one frame too far, tread marks with an uncommon pattern. None of it is conclusive, all of it is useful. The picture they assemble points toward a narrow perimeter, a derelict industrial ring on the city's edge, a corridor of weather-beaten warehouses, a seasonal residence shuttered and forgotten. Time, in this phase, is both enemy and currency. Every hour of Noah's captivity heightens the risk of panic and escalation, yet each hour also gives the rescue team space to choreograph a response that does not turn the exchange into a massacre. Matt's staging is as theatrical as it is tactical. He specifies a neutral site with no easy ingress, an unlit bridge, a wind-scraped lot beyond a shuttered plant, the fringe of a wood where roads fracture into dirt. He insists Nick arrive alone, with Sienna, with no calls and no trackers. The terms isolate the players and are meant to strip the encounter of backup and time. Beneath this is a simple bet: if Nick brings muscle, Matt kills Noah quickly; if Nick obeys, Matt acquires the one thing he wants more than vengeance, the power to make Sienna watch. As for the scenario in which he kills them both, it is not the first draft of Matt's plan, but it is written in the margins. His initial logic is coercive, not terminal: abduct Noah, force Sienna's choice, humiliate the family, engrave his grievance onto their lives. But a man balanced on the fault line between injury and rage is a man who can crumble under a tremor. One small event could collapse restraint into ruin, a flinch that reads as mockery, a whispered signal from Nick, a glint of blue and red where there should be only night. In that instant the exchange becomes a last stand, and a last stand has room for only one kind of ending. From the outside, this is a crisis. From the inside, it is a crucible. Nick must prove that resolve and prudence can live in the same heartbeat. Sienna must absorb the full weight of consequence without surrendering to a logic that excuses violence as love. Matt must face the abyss he dug with his own hands and understand that every step toward control has led him farther from the man he thinks he is. The meeting, when it comes, will not simply trade one body for another, it will reveal what each of them values when there is no space left for pretense. One decision in the dark can save a life, take two, or shatter every bond that once held this family in place. The next word, the next breath, will decide whether this night becomes a rescue, a funeral, or the first chapter of damage none of them will ever fully repair.